When the sun first touches the ancient domes of Istanbul, waking the city from a long sleep, the stone streets also begin to echo with a sound that feels deeply familiar. Taze simit, taze simit! Fresh, hot simit here. That cry sounds simple and rustic, carrying a warm rhythm like a natural alarm clock. It has been there for hundreds of years, weaving its way through every corner of the markets, drifting down to the windy ferry docks, and even waking the tiny tea houses along the roadside. In this land, people are not simply pushing their carts out onto the streets to sell a breakfast food. The way they call out, the way people stand in line waiting, in truth, they are passing from hand to hand a way of life, an ordinary rhythm that has nourished countless generations of people here. And there is one thing that anyone who has ever set foot here must admit. The aroma of simit is unlike any other bread in the world. That smell is strange in the most beautiful way. It is not merely the scent of baked flour that you can find in any bakery while traveling. It is richer, deeper, and carries a soul entirely of its own. It is the blending of faint crackling charcoal smoke, the gentle sweetness of melted Pekmez grape molasses, and the explosive nutty fragrance of millions of dark, roasted sesame seeds. But perhaps the thing that creates the greatest difference is the love and the decades of experience gathered within the rough, weathered hands of the old bakers. So what secret has truly remained hidden inside those old brick ovens? Why is it that simply walking past a tiny red street cart is enough for that aroma to instantly pull you back, leaving you absent-mindedly turning your head to look? Together, let us step into the world of century-old bakeries to find the answer. To understand why simit holds such a sacred place in the hearts of Turkish people, we have to drift back through time for a moment. This ring-shaped bread is not simply a quick snack sold on the streets, but a living historical witness that has existed for hundreds of years. Centuries ago, simit proudly appeared on elegant silver plates at the dining tables of the sultans within the royal Ottoman palace. Yet, as time passed, it quietly transformed itself in the humblest way possible, stepping out from the palace walls to rest neatly upon the small, red-painted carts that have watched over every rise and fall on the corners of modern streets today. This city has changed tremendously. Towering buildings have risen into the skyline, and life has grown faster and more restless with each passing year. But one thing has never truly changed. Turkish people, whether a wealthy businessman or an old street sweeper cleaning the roads at dawn, still begin their mornings with the same familiar aroma of freshly baked hot simit. Inside those long-standing bakeries, you will not find even the slightest trace of modern machinery or conveyor belt production lines. Here, every stage of the process is carried out completely by hand by the bakers themselves. You can watch them lean their entire bodies into kneading heavy masses of dough, patiently waiting hours for the fermentation to fully develop, then carefully shaping each piece into smooth, twisted rings with practiced hands. Right after that comes the step of dipping the bread into shimmering Pekmez grape molasses before rolling it evenly across large trays of fragrant roasted sesame seeds. Finally, the breads are placed inside high-heat Ottoman-style stone ovens, baked slowly by the natural heat of burning wood fire. It is these essential elements, all done entirely by hand, that blend together to create a truly one-of-a-kind aroma. It is a flavor that carries within it the warmth of human hands and the passage of time itself, something no machine or modern industrial bakery anywhere in the world could ever replicate. The biggest secret that creates the completely unique difference of simit begins with a very special ingredient called Pekmez. This is a traditional syrup that Turkish people cook entirely by hand from ripe, fresh grapes or seasonal mulberries. The process of making this syrup requires a tremendous amount of patience. People must press the fruit to extract the pure juice, then boil it continuously over a fire for many hours, carefully maintaining the flame evenly until the water fully evaporates and thickens into a smooth syrup with a dark brown color like amber. This grape syrup carries a sweetness that is very deep and gentle rather than sharp, along with a faint scent of wood smoke characteristic of the countryside. It is exactly the natural, unrefined sugar combined with minerals and the special concentration of organic acids naturally present in the grapes that creates a foundational layer of aroma, something that industrial cane sugar or even pure honey could never imitate or replace. After the raw simit dough rings are shaped by hand by the bakers, they go through an important turning point before officially being baked. Each dough ring is submerged into a large container filled with Pekmez grape syrup, diluted with clean water according to a secret golden family ratio. This sticky syrup coating, once attached to the dough, acts exactly like an extremely perfect natural glue. When the baker lifts the wet dough ring out and immediately drops it into a tray of sesame seeds, this layer of Pekmez helps millions of roasted sesame seeds cling tightly to the surface of the bread, covering it completely from inside to outside without fear of falling off throughout the baking process. Not only does it serve as a binding layer, but this unique grape syrup bath is also the golden key that allows simit, once removed from the oven, to always possess a glossy crust, an irresistibly crispy texture, and a rich fragrance, creating a world of difference compared to all ordinary bread rings that you can find anywhere else in the world. If explained more deeply from the perspective of food science, the answer to this addictive aroma lies in the way Pekmez grape syrup reacts with fire. When the bread is placed deep inside a brick oven heated by oak wood at an extremely high temperature, the natural fruit sugar contained in the Pekmez coating surrounding the crust immediately transforms into a caramelized state at a very rapid speed. This high-temperature process simultaneously activates the Maillard reaction, a magical chemical reaction between natural sugars and amino acids. It is this reaction that releases a series of aromatic compounds, bringing out the deeply sweet, rich fragrance mixed with a slightly smoky bitterness that is incredibly seductive and characteristic of simit. Another key point is that because Pekmez has an exceptional heat resistance, far superior to honey or refined sugar, the caramel crust surrounding the bread is able to cook perfectly, preserving the deepest and richest roasted fruit aroma without ever becoming burnt or bitter or destroying the original delicious flavor of the bread. After the sole of the bread has been fully prepared through carefully fermented dough rings, the baker begins working on the outer coating, the very thing responsible for the irresistible aroma that can be smelled from several streets away. The next secret behind simit lies in the tiny sesame seeds themselves. But it is not as simple as just taking raw sesame from a sack and casually sprinkling it over the dough. Before they are spread across the surface of the bread, all of the sesame seeds must go through a very strict preparation stage, which is lightly toasting them over an extremely gentle flame. The baker has to stand beside the pan continuously stirring with steady hands, so the sesame seeds are only just warmed through, turning into a soft, pale golden color, but absolutely not fully roasted or browned. This low-temperature toasting step is like a wake-up call, activating the rich aromatic oil pockets hidden deep inside each tiny sesame seed, preparing them to release their fragrance as powerfully as possible the moment they later come into contact with the blazing heat of the oven. Right after the sesame seeds have been awakened perfectly, the magical binding process begins beneath the swift hands of the skilled baker. Each ring of raw simit dough, soft and elastic, is lifted carefully before being quickly submerged deep into a basin filled with Pekmez, the traditional syrup slowly reduced from grapes or mulberries that we explored earlier. Dipping the bread into this diluted grape molasses is not simply done to create a slight sweetness for the bread, but instead plays an extremely important role as a perfectly flexible, natural adhesive layer. The thin and glossy coating of Pekmez wrapped around the wet dough ring helps the sesame seeds cling tightly and densely across the entire surface of the bread, without falling away during the following stages. At the same time, this very layer of syrup interacts directly with the intense heat inside the brick oven, creating a dark caramelized crust with a glossy shine that is completely unmistakable. The moment the bread is lifted out of the grape molasses basin, while it is still soaking wet and filled with sweetness, the baker immediately throws it into a gigantic sea of sesame waiting inside a large brass tray nearby. With movements that are fast, skillful, and incredibly precise, they continuously flip and turn the dough ring, burying it deep into the pile of lightly toasted sesame seeds so every single seed attaches evenly into every corner and every tiny gap of the twisted dough ring. A proper traditional simit, made in the style of Istanbul, must have a sesame coating that is thick and completely packed, almost without revealing even a single patch of the pale dough hidden underneath. Watching the baker lift the bread and gently shake it once so the excess sesame seeds fall back onto the tray with soft crackling sounds, you can truly understand the level of care and dedication behind this handmade craft. And then, the most magical moment truly happens when the bread is finally placed deep inside the blazing wood-fired oven. Under the overwhelming heat of the charcoal flames, the abundant natural sugars inside the Pekmez coating begin the caramelization process at an extremely rapid speed, coloring the bread into a glossy chestnut brown shade. At exactly the same moment, the intense heat also attacks the outer sesame coating, causing the oils inside the lightly toasted sesame seeds to be released completely and form aromatic compounds known as pyrazines. These two chemical reactions do not happen separately, but instead blend tightly together, creating a fragrance that is deeply sweet, rich, nutty, buttery, and touched with a faint smoky bitterness that is unmistakably characteristic of simit sold across the street corners of Istanbul. That strangely irresistible aroma is exactly the reason why anyone who accidentally catches its scent while walking past cannot help but stop in their tracks and immediately crave buying one. After passing through every secret, from the carefully kneaded strands of dough, the shimmering sweet basin of Pekmez grape molasses, all the way to a sea of fragrant, lightly toasted sesame seeds, the final secret of simit is the sunburnt, calloused hands of the old bakers, marked deeply by the passing years. Every single bread ring, from the moment it is still nothing more than a rough and lifeless mass of dough, must go through the process of being squeezed, stretched, and twisted by hand into its rope-like shape with extraordinary rhythm and skill. The old bakers do everything entirely by instinct, a priceless instinct accumulated through tens of thousands of hours of tireless labor across countless seasons of rain and scorching sunlight. Something no intelligent algorithm or modern machine anywhere in the world could ever copy or replace. The baker only needs to lightly touch the dough with the tips of his fingers to immediately know whether it has reached the proper elasticity, or whether more or less pressure from the palm is needed to smooth the dough without tearing it apart. These tiny imperfections, these random irregularities hidden inside every handmade movement and every gentle human touch, unintentionally create a very unique texture, while also breathing a completely distinct soul into each loaf that comes out of the oven. The clearest difference in this handmade process is that when the bread is twisted entirely by human strength, the surface of the dough will never become perfectly flat, perfectly even, or flawlessly smooth, like the shapes cut from industrial molds. Instead, each bread ring naturally develops winding folds, tiny little gaps, and uneven surface tension across different edges and corners. These random bumps and intentional spaces created by the handmade method accidentally open pathways for the extreme heat and fragrant smoke from the natural wood-fired oven to easily slip through and penetrate deep into the heart of the bread in the most natural way possible. The blazing heat of the charcoal fire does not strike the surface in a rigid and mechanical pattern, allowing the bread, once baked, to develop a glossy crust that becomes crispy in some places and thicker in others, creating an incredibly satisfying texture. At the same time, it carries a deep, lingering aroma, blended together with that unmistakable, handmade feeling, which modern mass production lines today find extremely difficult to imitate. That is the reason why many ancient bakeries, hidden within the old historic streets of Istanbul, still stubbornly preserve this traditional method unchanged after decades, despite the passing of time. They willingly accept harder physical labor and slower production speed, completely refusing modern machinery or soulless automated systems. Inside the hazy, smoke-filled atmosphere of these old bakeries, where there is nothing but pure white flour, glowing wood fire, and precious lessons passed down orally through generations, the bakers continue silently and tirelessly, creating batch after batch of bread filled with dedication and love for their craft. And so, whenever travelers hold a freshly baked hot simit in their hands and take a bite, they are not only tasting the rich, nutty flavor of a simple street food, but deep within every sense, they can also feel the warmth of human hands, the immense patience of generations of people, and a 1,000-year flow of history still alive and moving through every strand of that humble bread. If you ever have the chance to wander through the narrow little streets of Istanbul, you will easily come across a very familiar sight. People here rarely eat simit by itself. No matter the time of day, this ring-shaped bread almost always comes together with a steaming glass of black tea known as chai. The tea itself is very humble, carefully poured into a tiny tulip-shaped glass. That distinctive shape of glass you will see everywhere across the land of Turkey. For local people, slowly sitting by the front porch, tearing off a small piece of bread and taking a sip of hot tea is not simply about eating breakfast to fill the stomach. It feels more like a gentle habit, a peaceful little ritual that helps them begin the new day while quietly watching the rhythm of life drift by around them. The pairing between simit and black chai tea is absolutely not a coincidence or some temporary local preference. The light bitterness, elegant flavor, and comforting warmth of Turkish black tea seem as though they were created especially for simit itself, helping balance out the rich, oily nuttiness of the roasted sesame coating wrapped around the bread. At the same time, the deep character of the tea also gently softens the caramel sweetness coming from the Pekmez grape molasses baked along the crust, preventing the bread from ever feeling too heavy or overly sweet. One bite of crispy, nutty bread, followed by a sip of lightly bitter steaming tea, everything blends together into a strangely harmonious feeling that makes people want to keep slowly savoring it through the windy early mornings without stopping. But perhaps simit is also tied to one of the most special and romantic images that can only truly be found in Istanbul itself. On the windy ferry rides crossing the Bosphorus Strait, local people often have the habit of tearing their simit into tiny pieces and tossing them into the open air for the flocks of seagulls circling across the sky. The sound of the waves softly crashing together with the cries of the birds, and the sight of raised hands sharing humble pieces of bread creates a scene so peaceful it almost becomes heartbreaking. In that very moment, simit is no longer simply a piece of street food anymore. It becomes an invisible thread connecting people with wild nature, while also bringing complete strangers a little closer together in the heart of the ancient city. If we pause for a moment in the middle of this hurried modern life, close our eyes and slowly breathe in the aroma of a freshly baked simit, you will understand why that fragrance has such a powerful ability to move people's hearts. It is absolutely not a coincidence, but the result of a patient and complete harmony between three humble elements that can never truly be separated from one another. First comes the deep, glossy sweetness of the Pekmez grape molasses wrapped around the outer crust. Then comes the evenly coated layer of roasted sesame seeds, rich, nutty, and fragrant. And finally, there are the careful twisting movements created by the handmade touch of the old bakers, a craft that has quietly survived for hundreds of years. Only when all three of these elements come together, hiding inside the fierce heat of the wood-fired oven and enduring the flames together, do they finally create that deep and unmistakable aroma. It is a smell so familiar that even a person from Istanbul, no matter how far away they travel, could recognize it instantly from a passing breeze without ever mistaking it for anything else. Because of the devotion and care poured into it, simit has never been, and never will be, merely a cheap ring-shaped bread sold casually on street corners. To the people here, simit is the smell of early mornings when the ancient city is still covered in pale mist. It is a fragment of poor yet warm childhood memories shared across generations, and a piece of breath tied closely to the hurried rhythm of everyday life on this land. It is truly a timeless sensory experience, an invisible thread connecting the past with the present, carrying people through the rise and fall of history and leading them back toward the most humble and original things in life. When you hold a hot simit in your hands, you are not simply holding food. You are touching an entire spiritual and cultural inheritance. a living historical witness that the people of Istanbul have proudly protected through countless years of change. And yet, modern life, with its fast-moving world of technology, is quietly bringing feelings of sadness and concern to this traditional food. Today, because of financial pressure, rising rent costs, and the need to reduce production expenses, many modern simit bakeries are gradually turning away from tradition and switching to industrial electric ovens. This change may help bakers produce bread faster, in larger quantities, and with far less labor. But it also means that the gentle, fragrant smoke from natural oak wood, the very soul responsible for the deep, crispy, slightly charred crust, is slowly fading away and may one day disappear forever. Sometimes, when looking at old charcoal ovens growing cold and dark, people suddenly realize with heartbreak that within the cruel flow of time, the thing we truly need to protect is not merely a lifeless recipe written on paper. What deserves to survive even more are the flickering wood flames, the ash-covered hands of the bakers, and the original rich aroma that has nourished the soul and shaped the identity of Istanbul for centuries.